My name is Jasmine. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I believed I was living a life most people would envy. I taught English at a high school in Atlanta, loved my students, and went home every evening to a husband I thought adored me. For 2 years, I was convinced I had married my best friend, the kind of man people described as one of the good ones. Devin worked from home as a software developer, which meant he was always there when I got back from school. Sometimes dinner was already waiting. Other nights, we cooked together, music playing softly while we talked about our days. He listened when I complained about grading papers late into the night. He laughed at my jokes. He held me when I was tired. Every single night, without exception, he brought me a glass of water and my vitamins. He'd sit beside me on the bed, press a gentle kiss to my forehead, and smile. Gotta keep my girl healthy, he'd say. I trusted him completely. That's the part that still makes my stomach turn. Because trust, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a weapon. And I didn't realize mine was being used against me until it was almost too late. Looking back now, I can see the cracks. But at the time, everything felt normal, comfortable, even safe. We'd been married for 3 years. We met at a tech conference where I was chaperoning students for a STEM event, and he was giving a presentation on cybersecurity. The irony of that still haunts me. He was charming, intelligent, and attentive. After a year of dating, he proposed. Our wedding was small and intimate. Our families adored him. My parents told me how lucky I was. And for a while, I truly believed I was. About 6 months before my life unraveled, Devin developed a sudden interest in health and wellness. He started reading articles, listening to podcasts, talking about supplements and stress management. He told me teaching was exhausting and that I deserved extra care. That's when the vitamins began. They looked harmless, plain capsules in a generic bottle. Devin said they were a custom blend: magnesium, vitamin D, B complex, something to help me sleep better. At first, I actually felt more rested. I slept deeply, too deeply. Then small things started happening. Conversations I couldn't remember, mornings where I woke up more exhausted than when I went to bed, moments in my classroom where my mind went completely blank. I told myself I was stressed. Devin told me the same thing, and I believed him. Because at that point, I still thought the man sharing my bed was protecting me, not slowly erasing me. But what I didn't know then was that those little white pills weren't helping me sleep. They were stealing pieces of my life night after night. And soon, I would discover just how much had already been taken. At first, the changes were subtle enough that I could explain them away. A forgotten conversation here, a missed detail there. I told myself it was normal. Teaching teenagers all day was exhausting after all. Devin agreed. He said I was overworked, that I carried too much on my shoulders. He spoke with such confidence and concern that I never questioned him, but the gaps kept growing. Devin would casually mention things I supposedly said or decided, and I'd feel a strange chill run through me. Plans I didn't remember making, opinions I didn't recall sharing. He'd say things like, "You already told me that," or "We talked about this last week." And I'd nod along, embarrassed by what I assumed was my own failing memory. I started waking up drained, bone deep exhausted, even after sleeping 9 or 10 hours. Standing in front of my class, I'd lose my train of thought mid-sentence. Words I'd taught for years suddenly slipped away from me. My students noticed before I did. One of them asked if I was feeling okay, and that question stayed with me all day. Then there were the clothes. I'd fall asleep wearing one thing and wake up wearing something else entirely. A nightgown I barely recognized, pajamas I didn't remember changing into. When I asked Devin about it, he smiled gently and said I must have changed in my sleep, that I was half awake and didn't remember. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. A few weeks later, I noticed bruises on my arms. Small ones. Yellow and purple, shaped almost like fingerprints. My heart raced as I stared at them in the mirror. I asked Devin that night, trying to sound calm. He looked genuinely worried, at least I thought he did, and suggested I might be anemic or bumping into things without realizing it. He even offered to schedule a doctor's appointment. He drove me there, sat beside me in the waiting room, held my hand while blood tests were done. When everything came back normal, the doctor suggested stress or anxiety. Devin latched onto that explanation immediately. He said teaching was breaking me down, that medication might help. By the end of the day, I had a new prescription, more pills, more trust. I didn't feel anxious before all this started. That's what scared me the most. The fear came after the confusion, after the exhaustion, after the growing sense that something in my life was quietly unraveling. My phone became another source of unease. I'd see text messages I didn't remember sending, replies to friends that didn't sound like me, short, stiff messages missing my usual warmth. When I brought it up, Devin said, I probably texted while half asleep. Again, it made sense. Again, I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? He was my husband. The man who kissed me goodnight. The man who told me he loved me. The man I trusted with my body, my mind, my life. I didn't yet understand that trust was exactly what he was counting on. It wasn't until someone outside my marriage noticed something was wrong that I began to question the story I'd been telling myself. And once I did, nothing felt safe anymore. The first person to say the words out loud wasn't me. It was my best friend, Kesha. She called me one afternoon during my planning period at school, her voice unusually serious. We'd been friends since college, close enough that she knew my moods before I did. She asked if I was okay. Not the polite kind of question, this one carried weight. She told me I'd seemed off the last time we spent time together. Slower, distant, like I was sedated. I laughed at first, embarrassed. Told her I was just tired. The teaching had been rough lately, but the way she went quiet on the other end of the line made my chest tighten. She said my eyes looked glazed, that I'd moved like I was underwater. I hung up and sat there staring at my desk, my heart pounding. That conversation cracked something open in me. For the first time, I stopped immediately dismissing the unease I'd been carrying. I started paying attention. Not in an obvious way. I didn't want Devin to sense anything, but quietly, internally. I watched patterns, timings, reactions. That's when I noticed the drawer. Devin's home office had always been off limits during work hours, and I respected that. He said he handled sensitive client data and needed privacy. One afternoon, I came home early because of a teacher workday and wandered toward his office to ask a quick question. The door was open. He wasn't there. But the bottom drawer of his desk was locked with a small padlock. It hadn't been locked before, not once in our entire marriage. I stood there staring at it, my pulse loud in my ears. A deep, instinctive alarm went off in my body, one I'd ignored too many times already. When Devin returned, I asked about it casually, forcing myself to sound unconcerned. He barely looked up, said a new client required extra security, sensitive information. He smiled and asked what I wanted for dinner. I nodded, but the feeling didn't leave. Over the next few weeks, I noticed how intense he was about my vitamins. If I forgot to take them or said I'd do it later, something flashed across his face. Not anger exactly, but tension, control. He'd stand there until I swallowed them. Sometimes he'd joke about how forgetful I was, but his eyes stayed fixed on my mouth. One night, everything shifted. I woke up, or thought I did, around midnight. My body felt impossibly heavy, like it didn't fully belong to me. From the hallway, I heard Devin's voice on the phone. Low, careful. Tuesday night, he said. Same deal, she'll be out cold. My blood turned to ice. I tried to move, tried to get up, tried to speak. Nothing happened. I was trapped inside my own body. I must have passed out again because the next thing I remember was morning. Devin was smiling like always, pouring coffee, acting normal. I told myself it had been a dream. I had to, because the alternative, that my husband was talking about me like that, was too terrifying to face. But once that seed of doubt was planted, it wouldn't stop growing. And soon, I would make a decision that would expose everything he'd been hiding. After that phone call, or what I desperately wanted to believe was a dream, I couldn't unhear the words. She'll be out cold. They echoed in my mind during class, during dinner, even when Devin wrapped his arms around me like nothing was wrong. I started testing reality in small, quiet ways. The first time I pretended to take the vitamins, my hands were shaking so badly I thought he'd notice. I put the pills in my mouth, lifted the glass of water, and mimed swallowing. Then I turned away, went into the bathroom, and spat them into a tissue. My heart raced as I flushed them down the toilet. Nothing happened that night. No footsteps, no sounds. I told myself I was being paranoid. The next night, Devin watched more closely. He stood there until I drank the water, then asked me to open my mouth. He laughed while he said it, like it was a joke, but it didn't feel funny. It felt like a test. I passed. But the control was undeniable now. About a week later, the pills tasted different, slightly bitter. They dissolved faster than usual. Fear cut through the fog in my head so sharply it made my chest hurt. I decided then that I wasn't going to sleep. Not really. I was going to stay awake and find out the truth. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The drowsiness came fast and heavy, dragging at my eyelids like a weight. My limbs felt useless. My thoughts scattered. I bit the inside of my cheek until it hurt. Dug my fingernails into my palms, counted backward from 1,000. I focused on fear, on the locked drawer, the bruises, the phone call. Devin came in about 30 minutes later. I kept my eyes closed, slowed my breathing, let my body go limp. I felt him lean over me close enough that I could feel his breath. He was checking to see if I was unconscious. After a long moment, he left the room. I lay there shaking in the dark. Almost an hour later, he came back. This time, I barely cracked my eyes. I saw him pull something from his pocket. He stood over me for several seconds, then left again without turning on the light. I was terrified. Later, long after midnight, I heard him walking downstairs. Not to the kitchen, not to the bathroom, the basement. We barely used the basement. It was unfinished, storage only. There was no reason for him to be down there, especially not at that hour. I waited. Every second stretched unbearably long. Finally, I forced myself to sit up. My head spun. My body moved like it didn't belong to me, but I stepped into the hallway and crept toward the basement door. That's when I heard voices. More than one. Devin wasn't alone. And in that moment, I understood something terrible. Whatever he was doing, he'd been doing it for a long time. What I heard next behind that basement door would shatter every illusion I had left and push me to do something I never imagined I was capable of. I pressed my ear against the basement door, barely breathing, terrified the sound of my own heartbeat would give me away. My legs felt weak, like they might collapse under me at any second. Devin's voice floated up from below, calm, confident, familiar in a way that made my stomach churn. "Should be good for a few more hours, Idal," he said. Another man answered. His voice was low, rough. "You sure she won't wake up?" Devin laughed. That laugh will haunt me for the rest of my life. "She never does," he said. "Trust me. The dosage makes sure of it." I stumbled back from the door, covering my mouth to keep from screaming. There was someone else in my house, not for the first time. And from the way they spoke, this wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was routine. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything at once. The bruises, the memory gaps, the clothes, the exhaustion, the phone messages that didn't sound like me. All of it slammed together into one horrifying realization. I had been right, and I had never been safe. I somehow made it back to the bedroom, though I don't remember walking there. I crawled into bed and pulled the covers around myself like they could protect me. I shook so hard I thought I might be sick. I lay there listening to muffled voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing. An hour later, Devin came back upstairs. He checked on me like always, his hand hovering near my face, watching for movement. I forced my body to stay still, to breathe evenly, to survive. The next morning felt unreal. Devin kissed my forehead, handed me coffee, asked how I slept. I looked into his eyes and saw a stranger staring back. A man capable of unspeakable things. I smiled. I lied. I said I slept great. The moment he left the room, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. At school, I barely functioned. I taught on autopilot, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. During lunch, I locked myself in my classroom and cried until my chest hurt. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but the words felt impossible to say out loud. After work, instead of going home, I drove to a store and bought two small hidden cameras. I paid in cash. My hands shook the entire time. Sitting in my car afterward, I realized there was no turning back. That night, when Devin went for his usual evening run, I moved fast. I hid one camera in our bedroom, angled toward my nightstand. The second went into the basement, tucked inside an air vent. When Devin came home, I was sitting on the couch like nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. That night, I pretended to take the pills again. And this time, I didn't follow him. I let the cameras watch for me. For 3 nights, I gathered evidence instead of answers. But on the fourth morning, I would finally see the truth I wasn't prepared for. I barely slept those next 3 nights. Not because I was afraid Devin would notice, but because my body no longer trusted rest. Each night followed the same script. I pretended to swallow the pills. I flushed them away. I lay still, staring into the dark, listening to my husband move through the house like a stranger wearing his skin. The cameras recorded everything. On the fourth morning, Devin told me he had errands to run. Maybe lunch with a friend. He kissed me goodbye like always and pulled out of the driveway without a second glance. The moment his car disappeared, I locked the door and opened my laptop. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to be ready. I wasn't. The bedroom footage played first. There was Devin, night after night, handing me the pills, watching me swallow, leaning over my unconscious body to make sure I was out. The timestamp showed this hadn't been going on for 6 months like I'd believed. It had been 7. 7 months of my life erased. I watched him go through my phone while I lay limp beside him. I watched him type messages, delete things, change my clothes, move my body like it was an object, like I wasn't a person at all. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pause the video. Then I opened the basement footage. That was when the room started spinning. I saw Devin letting men into our house. Men I had never seen before. Men who shook his hand, handed him envelopes, cash. I saw him show them something on his laptop. Photos, videos. Their reactions told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just violating me, he was selling me. Selling images of my unconscious body. Selling access. Selling something that was never his to give. I saw timestamps, dates, repeated visits, familiar faces returning. This wasn't desperation. This was a system. I found the files next. Hundreds of them. Organized, labeled, going back months. I couldn't open them. I didn't need to. Their existence alone was enough to destroy me. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until my throat burned. Then something inside me changed. The horror didn't disappear, but it hardened, turned sharp, focused. He had taken my safety, my memory, my body. But he wasn't going to take my future. I backed everything up. Multiple drives, multiple cloud accounts. I packed a bag, clothes, documents, evidence. I didn't leave a note. I didn't look back. I called Kesha. I need you. What? I said. Right now. She didn't ask questions. She just said, I'm coming. As I walked out of that house for the last time, one thought echoed in my mind. He thought I was powerless. He was wrong. But exposing the truth was only the beginning. Because the moment I went to the police, my story stopped being private and became a fight for justice. Kesha was already waiting when I pulled into the parking lot of the coffee shop. The second she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. We didn't even order drinks. We sat in the far corner, and for the first time, I said the words out loud. My husband has been drugging me. My voice sounded strange, flat, detached, as if I were talking about someone else's life. But as I kept going, the dam broke. I told her everything, the vitamins, the memory gaps, the basement, the footage. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking so badly she had to hold them. We're calling the police, she said immediately. The thought terrified me. What if they didn't believe me? What if Devin talked his way out of it like he always did? But Kesha didn't give me time to spiral. She drove me to her house, stayed beside me while she made the call, and refused to leave my side. The officers arrived within half an hour. One of them was a woman, Detective Martinez. She didn't interrupt or rush me, she just listened. When I showed her the footage, I watched her expression change from concern to fury. She told me gently but firmly that what Devin had done wasn't just betrayal, it was a series of serious crimes. That afternoon, I was granted an emergency protective order. Devin was no longer allowed to come near me. The police executed a search warrant on our house the next morning. Detective Martinez called later that day. They found everything: the locked drawer full of hard drives, the hidden files, the altered supplements. Lab tests confirmed the pills contained a powerful sedative. Not vitamins at all. Devin was arrested at work. He tried to run. Hearing that brought me no comfort, just a strange, hollow numbness. 2 days later, my phone rang. His number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. He cried. He begged. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. I laughed, an ugly, broken sound I didn't recognize. I told him exactly what he was. Then I hung up and blocked the number. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. The legal process that followed was brutal. Statements, evidence, interviews. I testified before a grand jury. Then again during the trial. His lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, ironically using the symptoms Devin himself had caused. But the evidence was overwhelming. After 8 months, the jury returned their verdict: guilty on all counts. I collapsed into Kesha's arms as the weight of it finally lifted. At sentencing, I stood in court and looked Devin in the eye. I told him what he had taken from me and what he hadn't. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in prison. Justice didn't erase the trauma, but it gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: my voice. I thought the trial was the end of the nightmare, but healing turned out to be an entirely different battle, one I had to fight every single day. When the trial ended, people kept telling me it was over, that I could finally move on. I nodded and thanked them, but inside, I knew they were wrong. What Devin did didn't end with a verdict. It followed me home. It followed me into my sleep. It followed me into every quiet moment where my mind had space to remember. I couldn't go back to the house. I sold it as quickly as possible, even though it meant letting go of the life I thought I'd built there. Every room felt contaminated, like the walls themselves had watched and stayed silent. I donated most of the money to survivor support organizations. Keeping it felt wrong, like blood money. I moved to a new city, new apartment, new school, new routines, and still the fear came with me. I slept with every light on for months. I checked the locks repeatedly, sometimes getting out of bed 3 or 4 times just to make sure they were still secure. I installed security cameras, real ones this time, and watched the feeds obsessively. Pills of any kind made me nauseous. Even pain relievers sent my heart racing. Therapy became my lifeline. My therapist helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't weakness, it was trauma. My body had learned that sleep wasn't safe, that trust was dangerous, that stillness meant vulnerability. Healing, she said, wasn't about getting over it. It was about teaching my nervous system that the danger was over. Some days I believed her, some days I didn't. There were setbacks. Nightmares that jolted me awake soaked in sweat. Moments in public where a stranger standing too close made me panic. Times I wondered if this broken version of myself was permanent. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things shifted. I started sleeping through the night once or twice a week. I laughed with coworkers without forcing it. I stopped checking the cameras every 5 minutes. I remembered what it felt like to exist without constantly bracing for impact. About a year after I moved, someone new entered my life. His name was Marcus, a guidance counselor at my school. He was quiet, kind, and unfailingly respectful. When he asked me for coffee, I almost said no. Letting someone close again felt terrifying, but something about him felt steady. I told him the truth early on, not all at once, but enough. I expected him to pull away. Instead, he listened. He didn't rush me, didn't push boundaries, didn't get offended when I needed reassurance. He reminded me that consent wasn't just a word, it was an action, practiced daily. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe being seen. I wasn't healed, but I was healing, and that mattered more than I ever realized. 2 years after the night I pretended to swallow those pills, I finally understood what survival really meant and why my story wasn't ending with pain, but with purpose. 2 years have passed since the night I pretended to swallow those pills. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to be back in that house, living a life that wasn't real. Other mornings, I wake up grounded, aware of where I am, who I am, and how far I've come. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. It came the first time I slept through the night without checking the door, the first time I took medicine prescribed by a doctor I trusted without shaking, the first time I laughed and realized I hadn't been afraid in that moment. I'm still in therapy. I probably will be for a long time. Trauma doesn't disappear just because justice is served. It reshapes you. It forces you to rebuild yourself piece by piece, deciding what parts of your old life you want back and which ones you leave behind. I stayed a teacher. Some people asked why. Why stay in a job that requires so much emotional energy after everything I'd been through? The answer was simple. My students reminded me that I still mattered, that my voice still carried weight, that I wasn't just a victim. I was a person with something to give. Devin tried to appeal his sentence. It failed. He is still in prison. According to public records, he's had multiple disciplinary violations. I don't feel satisfaction knowing that. I feel distance. He no longer occupies space in my daily thoughts, and that's the closest thing to peace I could hope for. Some of the men who paid him were prosecuted. A few tried to apologize. I didn't accept it. Forgiveness isn't something anyone is owed, especially when harm was a choice, not an accident. Closure didn't come from hearing them speak. It came from walking away. I tell this story now for one reason, because I didn't know what was happening to me until someone else noticed, until someone asked a question I couldn't ignore. And I wonder, how many people are living inside confusion right now, blaming themselves for symptoms that aren't their fault? If someone is insisting you take pills you didn't choose, question it. If you're losing time, memory, or pieces of yourself, take it seriously. If your instincts are screaming that something is wrong, listen. Control often hides behind concern. Abuse often wears the mask of care. What happened to me wasn't caused by love. It was caused by manipulation. And understanding that truth freed me from the shame I carried for so long. I survived something I never imagined I could. Not because I was fearless, but because I chose to pay attention when fear finally made sense. If my story reaches even one person who feels confused, frightened, or alone, then speaking up is worth it. You are not weak for trusting. You are not stupid for missing the signs. And you are not broken beyond repair. I'm still here. And if you're reading this, so are you. But before the story truly ends, there's one final thing I need to say. Something I wish someone had told me before everything fell apart. If I could go back and speak to the woman I was before everything collapsed, I wouldn't warn her about Devon. I wouldn't tell her to run or list every sign she missed. I would tell her something much simpler and much more important. I would tell her to trust herself. For months, my body tried to warn me. The exhaustion, the confusion, the quiet panic that settled into my chest for no clear reason. I felt something was wrong long before I could explain it. But I kept looking outward for answers instead of inward for permission to believe myself. That's the hardest lesson I learned. We're taught to doubt ourselves, especially when the threat doesn't look like a threat, especially when it wears the face of someone who says they love us. We're told love is sacrifice, patience, understanding. No one tells you that love should never require you to disappear. What happened to me was not a misunderstanding. It was not a mistake. It was not something I caused by being trusting or kind. It was a choice someone else made, again and again. I still live with the consequences of that choice. There are days when the world feels heavy, when I double-check locks or hesitate before closing my eyes. But there are also days filled with normal, ordinary happiness. And those days matter more than anything Devon ever took from me. I have a life now that is mine. I choose what goes into my body. I choose who touches me. I choose who knows my story. And telling it, on my terms, has been one of the most powerful steps in my healing. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, please don't ignore it. Confusion is not normal. Fear without explanation is not something you should push through. If your reality feels unstable, if pieces of your life don't add up, you are allowed to question why. Talk to someone you trust. Seek help outside the circle that controls you. Document what you can. Protect yourself without guilt. And if you're already on the other side, if you're surviving something you never asked for, know this: healing is not linear. Some days will hurt more than others. That doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're human. I didn't think I'd survive this story when it began, but I did. And now I live not as someone defined by what was done to her, but by what she overcame. If my story stays with you, share it. Speak up. Ask questions. Look closer at the things that don't feel right, because silence protects abusers and awareness saves lives. And if you ever find yourself wondering whether it's all in your head, remember this: your instincts exist to protect you. Listen to them. They might be trying to save your life.